during lunchtime. I'm more than pleased to welcome you here, that you make time. And since we're such a, let's say, a small, nice group, I think we can make it very interactive today. Let me introduce ourselves first. Maybe I quickly start because I have my slide up here. So I'm right now a fractional CFO for scale-ups. I help in fundraising and also grants, for example, EIC accelerator grants proposals, and I also help in M&A transactions. I'm the chairwoman of S2S Ventures, a student-led venture fund in Switzerland. We do like seed investments in science-based startups, mainly deep tech startups. And I've been myself an investor and angel investor for more than 12 years. And my clients and investments include several deep tech startups, some in the pharma industry like Tigan Pharma, then Cradle Bio software for the pharma industry, Polariton, which is a deep tech company in the semiconductor space, and others. And I'm very happy also, if you have questions, please connect with me also after this talk. And now I will hand over to Barbara.
Yeah, good morning, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Barbara Fischer. I own a company called Arena Ventures, and I am, similarly to Cynthia, helping startups with fundraising, either in the context of InnoSwiss, the Swiss Innovation Agency, or on a bespoke one-on-one basis. Cynthia, so just to talk a bit about the workshop, the way it's going to work, Cynthia is going to share her experiences and her view on fundraising for deep techs now in the next 10 to 15 minutes. Then I'm going to share mine, and there's a little bit of an overlap, but you will see that the experiences are quite different. And then we are obviously also very interested to hear from you what has worked for you and what hasn't, and to just understand a little bit who of you is here as a founder. Can you just put your hands up? Okay, deep tech founder, and who is an investor? And something else? Anything else? Interested? Okay, excellent. Welcome, everybody. So I will hand over to Cynthia again.
Okay. What I was thinking before about this workshop is what to give you most insightful, let's say, how investors look. What is the investor lens on deep tech startups, and what are typical pitfalls or typical, let's say, red flags that investors see? So first of all, investors do a due diligence on startups. They see many investments, and in order to decide in which ones to really deep dive, they have, like, let's say, a quick assessment of the red flags. And if they really find hard red flags, they are not going to do a due diligence on these startups. But if there are some aspects that can be, like, let's say, mitigated, they are interesting, these startups, they will do a due diligence. And so in order for you as a founder to very quickly identify let's say, avoid those pitfalls, I want to go through the, let's say, a selective few of these pitfalls. So I start with the team, because that's a very important aspect. So most deep tech founders actually are very technical, because typically it's a science-based idea and it has been founded or a spin-off by ETH or EPFL or other universities. And there is in some cases there is this problem, they call it no founder market fit. That means there is maybe technical know-how because there has been a lot of research, but not so much market know-how or industry know-how involved. This I think can be very nicely circumvented if you identify those gaps and really show that you are also able to hire people and attract people in your industry with the know-how. I think that's a very important aspect that investors usually give. Then also there is sometimes in a very early stage, there are too many founders, or sometimes a solo founder. For some investors, this is a problem to have a solo founder because everything will be concentrated on that person, and there is a risk that this person gets sick or will not be able to run the company for whatever reason. So this is also something that is very, in the early stages, very important. And then sometimes when you see the team, there are some, I call it local optima business co-founders, because for the InnoSwiss application, they needed somebody to fill in the gap for a certain expertise, so they took somebody on board. Also not very optimal if you present your team. So be aware of those. From your side, any does this sound familiar? Have you come across this? Anybody? Yeah. Okay. I think for some deep tech startups, especially when it's about, let's say, industrialization of technology, you have, at some point, you have to bring in new people that really understand something that you as a scientist maybe don't understand. Then the capitalization table, a very typical point. There is in deep tech startups, we find professors oftentimes or non-operative founders on the cap table. If they own each more than 10%, this is a red flag. This 10% is interesting because if you now wouldn't want to spin off a startup in Switzerland from EPFL, the EPFL asks already for 10% equity stake, which is quite high in my opinion. And the ETH has now launched, and I will show it to you, a new standard that they will in the future use, and I hope the EPFL is going to adapt to that standard as well. And the other aspect is a non-diverse equity table. How does that come into play? If you have a corporate investor, because many deep tech startups attract somebody in the industry because they have know-how. So they get a big corporate investor on board, and because they need capital, the dilution is quite high in the beginning, then this might also cause a little bit of a friction for the next round investors, because the investor looks like it's a strategic investor and not a financial investor anymore. So that is also something to be aware of. Also, by the way, for the EIC Accelerator application, if you have a corporate investor that owns more than 25%, it could be the case that you're not an SME anymore. This is a capitalization table also for, this is an example of advisory shares. So you usually also have early on advisors, non-operative advisors, and they also shouldn't have a significant equity share. What does it mean? Not more than 5%, I would say. And it depends a little bit, and you see here, this is a template, and you will find it under this link, where you can see, depending on the level of engagement, what is a fair share that you can offer to those advisors. And this fast template is actually a very good one for you to use to have a first starting point. And you can also mix your participation of equity in terms of engagement plus performance, right? So, for example, if you take someone on board who's helping in fundraising, you can make part of it as a commitment of his engagement and the other part as a performance fee. This is the licensing agreement that I was talking about from the ETH. This express licensing agreement is still under review, but hopefully will be launched soon, because then this is a standard for Switzerland. Because then we see that, for example, we are looking into range under point 2 of around 2 to 4% equity participation of the university, and of course royalties, and a sub-license fee, which is standard. But more or less, these are fair terms and don't compare to this 10% that I was talking about. Then another aspect to look for is if a company exists already for several years without traction. What does traction mean, right? I mean, deep tech is difficult to early generate revenues usually. But investors want to see some sort of a validation of the technology. And this can be done in through different areas. In this case, for example, I'm working with a company that has some validated MOUs. This is memorandums of understanding signed, or some kind of technology validation together with the clients. But ideally, it's LOIs. For example, I give you an example for the EIC accelerator. The best idea is to have LOIs already if you don't have revenues, to really show commitment from your clients that this is something promising. And depending a little bit, I mean, how long you are on the market already, it's more or less revenues are expected from you, right? And depending also on if it's a medtech device and you have to still go through some certification processes, of course you cannot show revenue, but you might show some academic sales early on, for example. Then another aspect or another red flag is this, I call it tunnel vision tech obsession. What does that mean? In that case, I wanted to give you an example. So the company I'm working with is in the datacom transceiver market. You see here the datacom transceiver market, and you see that it will develop to different speeds. So we are now at 400G, and it's slowly going into 800G, so 800 gigabytes per second, the data transmission rates. These are the data transmission rates of modulators. And it will develop further. So now, for example, the company positions itself as, yeah, we are going, it's going to come, this 1.6 terabyte is going to come, and we have the technology ready for 1.6 terabyte. Nobody else in the market has the 1.6 terabyte. So it's clear we're gonna serve this market. An investor would maybe say, okay, why do you believe that this is going to come? What's the alternative? And maybe you just put out, instead of a better material, you put out more lanes, more fibers, and it's very easy to actually physically build it, right? So you have to understand really in your own, about your own technology, what is the alternative? What's really what can happen, right? It might not be your technology that is out there. The market might develop differently. So really be a little bit more open about your market understanding. And then business savviness in that sense. Another aspect, if, for example, if you compare your technology to other technologies, what's the cost level? What's the economics? What are the unit economics? How does it, when does, for example, such a cost amortize? Because it's all infrastructure investments. When does this 400G infrastructure investment is going to be amortized for those players so that they will invest in the new technology? So these are aspects you have to think about before going to an investor, right? And a final one that is more like a different aspect, that is more like the shareholder agreement. With deep techs, what I see is that you have oftentimes corporates investing. Corporates are not always financial investors, depending on if they invest from their balance sheet or if they have a venture capital arm. And if they have some strategic, let's say, angle to it, they usually want to early on have either a right to later acquire your company, or make sure if they acquire your company that the price is kept in some way. So they can say, okay, today I do an investment of, let's say, a minority investment, but then in 5 years I want to have a call option on 100% of the company, but then today we already set a multiple on the price. Or they say, for example, I want to have a veto right on some sales because I don't want the company to be sold to a competitor, right? So these are aspects that are also very important. And here I just mentioned, and probably some of you are already aware of this, what are really the important clauses that the founders should understand and also dig deeper into. And another aspect is also of IP, of course. As I said, IP is always a thing where you have to, where investors look at, is it an exclusive IP? Is there a buyout clause? Is this already defined maybe in the buyout clause how much the IP is worth? And so on. So actually it's more from the investor's perspective, it's really exitability of the company. So if I invest today, can I exit the company? Or do I have to, in 20 years or in 10 years, discuss with a professor or with the university about the IP? That is a very important aspect for investors. Yeah, so from my side, I'm already through. If you have any questions to this, please let me know. Otherwise, we open later the discussion round, and I will hand over to Barbara.
Yeah, thank you. I think we will take the questions and sharing in a couple of minutes. I'm just waiting for the slides for one moment. But anyhow, maybe before the slides come on, I can already introduce myself. I already said my name is Barbara Fischer. I have a company based in Zurich called Arena Ventures. And by background, I'll show you, I am actually an entrepreneur. I am, if you ask me what I'm truly an expert in, it is B2B SaaS. I'm by background German, but I lived in Australia for 12 years, where I started and scaled and then sold my first company called Trend House. And here on the right side in this picture, you can see that we didn't quite start out of a garage, but we did start in a non-air conditioned office with 4 people on 3 desks. So I know exactly what it takes or what it feels like to be a founder, if not a deep tech founder. But anyhow, so since 2016, I'm now helping tech founders successfully with their fundraising rounds. And so talking about deep tech, I mean deep tech. I wanted to say when we actually worked on the title for this session, let's agree that deep tech has been around for a very long time. I've been doing this now for 10 years, more or less, and deep tech has been around. Now it has become the buzzword or flavor of the day or whatever you want to call it, because obviously of AI and faster processing of data. But let's agree that deep tech cases have been there all along. So as I said to you before, I'm not a deep tech expert per se, I don't claim to be, but I have successfully helped companies in the AI space, photonics and health tech find the funding. And now I'm going to share with you what has worked. So it's true for ICT, but it's especially true for deep tech companies. As Cynthia has already said, these companies take ages to develop their solutions. Often it's a science-based innovation and so on, but truly like long cycles in bioengineering and so on. So think carefully about when the right time is for you to leave the scientific, or like, let's say, the partner. Typically, these companies that I have seen, they have partner companies, be it universities, CSEM, like different research institutes. So be clear if and when you want to leave the company, and make the IP situation crystal clear before you go for any funding, right? Then also, I think in the very early stages for deep techs, it's a very smart idea to go for grant money. And in this context, I strongly advise you to ask our good friend ChatGPT to ask for what programs are available for EIC. So because EIC, and I know that firsthand because I had a couple of meetings in the last weeks, EIC is decidedly looking for Swiss tech again, and they look for rounds anywhere from $500,000 up to 100 mil of support. I'm not joking here. I was even surprised myself. Wow, 100 mil rounds. We are getting closer to our US friends. And also from the beginning, be very, very selective. I mean, you should go for any kind of startup, but in this case, even more so. Be selective about the type of investor you are taking on board. Be sure that these people understand you, because I see it too often that they've got no clue of deep tech and they don't even understand what you are doing properly. So do your due diligence on the investor, do reverse due diligence. Then a word about deal orchestration, right? It goes exactly with what I said about the IP, when is the right timing. But what I see, what's working very well, and I'm working with a couple of these types of founders, they manage the stakeholders super well. They know who is the boss of the EIC, they mingle at the right events, they find the right partners to scale their company and so on. They already talk to clients, it's exactly what Cynthia said. And founders who are able to do that and have literally a plan, you need to have a plan, and I don't mean in your head, I mean it hanging somewhere in your office. They actually, they make it, like they get the support and they get the funding. Also, last week I was working with 2 teams and they have amazing tech. It's a bit like, this will be my word or my term for the day. What was it again, Cynthia? What was it again? Like your funnel, tech, funnel, tralala. Like, obsession. Yeah, tech obsession, exactly. They said to me, hey, Barbara, and they've been in the market or developing now for 2 years, right? And I said to them, have you spoken to customers? Have you done interviews and so on? And they said, we're not 100% clear about our go-to-market. There's different avenues. And I said, yeah, how about you look at it a bit closer, not just like high level. You start talking to people and they said, that early. And I said, when is your grant money running out? Yeah, in 6 months, in 12 months. And I'm like, okay, well, yeah, you better start talking to people. Anyhow, like I think that's a stupid pretext to say, you know, I'm a deep tech founder, I don't have to look yet at customers. If you are an entrepreneur and you have no bloody customer obsession, and I'm saying not passion, but obsession, you are anyhow in the wrong job, sorry to say. Yeah? So, as Cynthia already said, a letter of intent, pilot agreements, whatever, have something in writing that you can submit to the EIC, that not just EIC, that you can submit to any investor, because what gives more trust than having such letters signed, right? And then, of course, also, I work with founders that will take another 2 years to finalize their product, and they have already 7-digit figure contract signed, okay? So if you have that, if you manage to do that, that's great, but always keep them in the loop about the stage of development and so on. Then hiring, or I wanted to write working with, because you don't hire a lawyer as such, but Cynthia was completely right, and maybe you were not confused with all the terms of this SHA, but the one thing that you need to have as a founder is, anyhow, again, not deep tech, whatever other tech, have an excellent lawyer to protect you, because I bet you any investor that I've met so far, whether it's private or institutional, and any partner also, they have excellent lawyers. So get yourself the best lawyer. The one that I use in Zurich, if you want a recommendation, is called Piroshka Poltera. I get no kickback, but she is the best tech lawyer that I know in Zurich. So, or email me afterwards and I can email you the name again. It's not the easiest. So, have somebody with a finance, part of a finance brain on your team, because often I see that the founders are, maybe they are commercial, maybe they are so good in sales, which is already good, and technical, but then doesn't have financial acumen. Either you teach yourself that quickly, or you learn it, or better bring somebody on board, and or get a board member. Both actually is good. And then what I see also working very well, get a grant manager in-house. I'm not saying for seed now, I'm not talking about seed, but I'm talking about pre-series A, series A. When you have the money to afford somebody, get that person on board, because what these people do, and that's what I've seen working very successfully, is they come typically from a grant perspective, so they come from a grant organization. They know, number one, how to communicate to other grant organizations, and number two, all they do all day long is, guess what, right? Apply for grants. So if you have 7, 8, 9 grants in the pipeline, a couple of them might come through, or several actually, I've seen it. So then, clear investor communication, right? So often, and we all agree, the tech is not that easy to explain. But please, please, please be very clear on the value proposition. Often when you ask a founder, yeah, what's the value prop, right? And that's already difficult enough to say for any startups, but especially in deep tech, and I get it, but it doesn't help. You need to be able to explain, hey, our solution will solve X and make it 80% cheaper, 50% faster, I don't know what, like talk business terms. Then, especially here, I put the product, okay, but the solution, that's what I just said. And then for the market, please, also, that's another one that's killing me too often. So what I see is not in TAM, SUM, and SOM have one number each. I mean, 3 numbers in total, right? Have one number, and that number is not the number of companies, not the number of potential end consumers or whatever that is. It is a dollar figure. So please don't kill investors with like, force them to do the homework themselves. Do your homework. And then commercials obviously goes without saying, but I've put it there because anyway, yeah, that needs some work, and that's, I could still talk a bit, but I'm actually interested in your experiences and learning what has worked for you, or you can also ask questions to Cynthia and I. It's a bit hot, and besides, the lunch is waiting, so thank you all for showing up. I appreciate it. Yeah. So I ask, who has raised funds successfully for their company so far? You, okay. I bring you the mic. And share what has worked, because
Yeah.
as I said,
No.
I'm not an expert.
I couldn't agree more with what the two of you said. Actually, I'm involved in. Is it on or not? Yeah. Okay. Okay. Usually, I join startups as a board member when they do their fundraising, as you just pointed out. So, what everything you said, it's spot on. And at least in my experience, founders are to a large extent educated by that if they go through venture kick, etc. But it's a no-brainer. But and yes, fundraising works then, even in difficult situations. I just closed a 4.5 million round for a biotech startup in such a situation. Right.
Yeah. I want to exactly. So, but is there anything else that you have experienced that wasn't on the slide yet?
I wouldn't say so, and I more often than not get invited to help startups. What has worked best, I have to say, and this may be different what you guys do, I'm then hired as a board member, and it's a different situation if you do fundraising with skin in the game as the chairman of the board or a board member with legal responsibilities towards the company, and not just as an advisor who is being paid for whatever he's doing. But this is my personal observation.
Yeah, of course.
Doesn't mean that advisors are not helpful.
Skin in the game always helps. Yeah. That's for sure. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, Alessio, did you want to say something?
No, because it's my experience is a bit ages ago and not in Switzerland. But I think it's important. So I might get off the track, but I think it's also important to be at the right time and in the right place. I remember when I was trying to raise for digital health, when no one was even understanding what digital health meant. So we needed to go to San Francisco at the time because they were the only one that understood that. And that made it much, much easier. And when we used the magical number of what was the impact, then we raised.
Very good example to this. I'm investor in Credit Bio. It's a tech bio company. And I mean, there are very little investors who understand technology and actually pharma and biology, right? So that is a little bit the challenge to also identify the right investors. And I think also Barbara mentioned it. It's important to really, before you do the outreach, that you really make your homework and know whom to approach, right? And there are like so many sources out there, right? Crunchbase or PitchBook if you have access, or you ask advisors who have access. And then you can see what kind of investments do these investors do, and do I fit really into their portfolio, or am I even a competitor to one of their portfolio companies? Because then they might want to talk to you, but for other reasons, right?
Yeah, so maybe I give one example of, and that I can publicly share, that has worked very well, and you might want to have a look at them on LinkedIn or on their website. The company is in the photonics space, and they are called Lithium. And they basically, they found the right point when they left the research center. And then what we did is I started working with them in the context of InnoSwiss about 2 years ago, 1.5. And they basically, we said, hey, let's not yet go to investors, even though the IP was very clean, clear, everything. Let's go for grants. And one of the two founders is very good at grants. He understands grant world, So we said, okay, let's first identify the right grants for this. Not, of course, only in Switzerland, but across Europe. So we did that for photonics. We submitted for everything. And then they got basically a grant for several million. I mean, they got actually 2 grants, but in total it was several million. And that de-risked the entire investment opportunity immediately. Then they went to the clients, or they went to their pipelines second. So, and we did that exactly like that on purpose. And after that, guess what? And this was for me the most beautiful moment last year, truly, that's why I love my work. After that, they were able to pick their investors. We were in the beautiful situation where we had actually reversed the situation, and where they said, okay, now we basically talked to a number of people, but it was all inbound. It was actually quite easy then. And this is the situation that you want to have. That's why I'm saying orchestration is key. That's key really for me in that space. It's actually key in any fundraising round, but when you have such long cycles, you need to be very sure that your money is not running out, So you need to actually plan even longer. So yeah. Does anybody else have a good story to share, whether it's from your direct portfolio? I mean, you said you are an investor. Do you invest in deep tech?
Yes, we do.
Yeah, and what's your view and your experience?
I second, I think, a lot of what you've been saying. What I've seen also from different founders is, unfortunately, their pitch deck is not structured in a way that is, as you mentioned here. And I think there is a gap between what VCs are looking at and founders when they want to pitch. And unfortunately, they do have a good product, but they just don't come prepared with a good deck, with a good pitch deck, with a good strategy, with a good vision. And I think the first impression is so important.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. Exactly. So exactly. And so there is one company, I give you that as a free advice to all the founders. It's called, or even like as a board member, you might give it to some of your startups. There's a company in Munich, and trust me, they are the best. They are called unicornpitch.com, unicornpitch.com. And what they do is they only do PowerPoint design services for startups. So whenever I go to basically with a team, when we do some tests, like I have some VC connections where we always test drive the deck, basically, where we say, now you don't give us the plain vanilla, too early, too late, not enough traction, blah, blah. You give us the real feedback. And then I say, but first you go to Unicorn Pitch, and they do this for 450 euros. Or Max, you said it was somewhere, the quote was between 500 and 1,000, right? Yeah. So anyhow, like it depends on how much work is required, etc. But you give the content and they do the design, and I can assure you the before and after is amazing every time.
But I think also to add on that, so it's not always only the design. In deep tech, it's also about the story, the equity story. So what are you selling to your investors, right? So what's the next inflection point? If you're now raising 10 million, what's your inflection point? The investor will look at it, okay, are they going to raise, if this is a Series A, the Series B, what is then their development status at that point? And I think that is oftentimes missing with very technical founders, because they haven't done it before. So they don't know what kind of inflection point, what kind of milestones do they need to show to these investors, and what is let's say, comprehensive equity story in that sense. I think, and there, I think that's, I have to make a little marketing for us. That's where we come into play, where we can help. But that is exactly what I think is important for this aspect. And there I see the let's say, breakthrough or not.
Yeah, and I would say, yeah, you can just say it. I think your voice is loud enough. I think, yeah.
It's also a question to you, ladies, and you are very experienced in that. But my most recent observation is, and this is very important, you have to very quickly find out, is this an investor who is going to invest because you fit the investment universe and the time? And what my observation is that VCs, but also family office, have started to misrepresent what they are doing. They are telling you they're going to invest, and you are now a sweet spot, and then you find out they don't have the money, and they just want to talk to you. And this is a little bit annoying. I don't know what your view on that is, and I only can recommend you have to figure this out fast. Is this an investor? Do they have money left? What is the stage of the fund?
Exactly. You need to understand from an institutional, so if it's a venture capitalist, you need to understand where are they at in terms of their fundraising life cycle. And then if it's a private, so family office, business angel, whatever it is, or like serial entrepreneurs who invest, you need to, in essence, you need to have the right target list. And this is exactly where we come in, or I'm not exactly like you need to ask Cynthia how basically what her model is, but our model, and Aurela is part of the team, of Arena Ventures team, you can also talk to her later. We work with qualified investor target lists, and that makes a huge difference, because in the end of the day, this is a sales process. Let's call it business development, call it whatever, but you are effectively selling part of your company, okay? So then you better also have sales skills, and you qualify, as in every business, the leads properly. That's it. And by the way, if you know, I give it to you now because it's, I mean, you are all in tech. If you know any women founders in tech who are currently looking for anywhere between 200K to 2 million, who have had some family and friends money, I have a workshop, or we are going to conduct a workshop on the 5th of June in Zurich. And we are still looking for women tech founders, because this world needs more women investors and more women tech founders. Yeah, and I think the rest we do it over lunch because it's quite hot in here. Thank you.